Just months after giving his kidney to save his fiancée, she refused to show up on their wedding day. Desperate, he went searching for her, only to find her in another man's arms, on the very day she was meant to marry him. There, she confessed she wanted a breakup. Shattered, he gave her one demand: return my kidney. What followed was a brutal revenge that shattered the whole world. The wedding hall was filled with music, laughter, and the soft chatter of guests waiting for the bride's grand entrance. Ethan stood at the altar, his hands trembling slightly, eyes scanning the room for the woman who was supposed to be walking toward him any second now. But she wasn't there. Minutes passed. His smile began to fade. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his chest. Panic rising, Ethan stepped down from the altar and rushed out of the hall. His shoes pounded against the pavement as he drove straight to Bianca's house, praying she was okay. He didn't bother knocking. He flung the door open, and his world stopped. There she was, Bianca, his bride, in bed with another man. His heart slammed against his ribs. Bianca. His voice cracked in disbelief, the single word slicing through the thick air. Bianca, her belly swollen with pregnancy, gasped and scrambled off the bed, clutching a bedsheet to her chest. Her eyes darted to him, wide and panicked. You should have knocked," she stammered, her voice shaking. Ethan's throat tightened. For a moment, no sound came out. His eyes blurred with tears. What are you doing with him? It's our wedding day, Bianca. Everyone's waiting for you at the venue. And here you are." His voice broke, but he tried to hold it together. Bianca's gaze dropped. Her voice was almost calm now, too calm. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I can't do this. I've realized I'm in love with someone else. With Marcus, my ex." Ethan's breath caught. His gaze shifted to the man lounging beside her. Marcus, a billionaire oil mogul, gold chains glinting under the light, tattoos creeping up his arms. Marcus smirked, leaning closer to Bianca, brushing his lips against hers as if Ethan wasn't even there. Ethan's knees almost buckled. Are you serious right now? After everything I've done for you? After everything I gave up?" His voice rose, raw and wounded. "I gave you my kidney, Bianca. When the doctors said you wouldn't survive, I put my life on the line for you." Bianca lifted her chin, her eyes cold. "And I appreciate that, Ethan. But I never forced you to do it." The words hit him like a thunderclap. His chest ached as if his heart had been ripped out. Tears spilled down his face, his breath trembling, his world collapsing around him in that single moment. Ethan didn't say another word. His lips trembled, his fists clenched at his sides, but he couldn't bear to look at them any longer. He turned and walked out. The air outside felt heavy, pressing down on his chest. Each step away from the house felt like dragging his own heart across broken glass. He reached the gate and pushed it open. His best friend, Daniel, sat behind the wheel of the car, waiting. But when Daniel saw Ethan's face, red eyes, tears streaming down, his jaw shaking, his smile vanished. "Ethan, what happened? Why are you crying?" Daniel's voice was filled with alarm. Ethan just stood there, his breath coming in short bursts. His throat burned, but no words came. He tried to speak, but instead a sob escaped, raw and helpless. "Ethan? Talk to me. Man, you're scaring me." Ethan shook his head slowly, climbed into the car, and stared out the window. The rain had started to fall again, each drop blurring the world outside, just like the tears blurring his own vision. Daniel didn't press him. He just drove, glancing at Ethan from time to time, his own chest tightening from the silent pain radiating off his friend. When they reached Ethan's house, Ethan stepped out without a word. His movements were slow, almost lifeless. He walked inside, shut the door behind him, and turned the lock. Upstairs, he collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. His phone kept buzzing on the table, again and again. Calls. Messages. The sound was relentless. They were all waiting for him. Family. Friends. The wedding guests who had been laughing and clapping just an hour ago. He couldn't answer. He couldn't tell them. How could he? How could he explain that the woman he loved, the woman he gave a part of himself to save, had betrayed him in the cruelest way? The buzzing grew louder in his head. His fingers reached for the phone, but instead of answering, he switched it off. The silence that followed was deafening. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every moment. The night she was dying in that hospital bed, the way he told the doctor without hesitation to take his kidney, the promise she made to spend the rest of her life with him. A bitter laugh escaped his lips, followed by another wave of tears. They were already married. The court ceremony had happened just weeks ago. He thought the wedding party was just a celebration of their love, but now, it felt like a funeral for everything he had ever believed in. And in that locked, silent room, Ethan's heart broke in a way that no one in the world could hear. Days bled into nights, and nights into days. But for Ethan, time had stopped the moment he walked out of Bianca's house. He barely ate. He barely slept. The curtains stayed drawn, the air in his home heavy and stale. Every knock on the door, every phone call from friends or family went unanswered. They came to console him, to tell him to be strong, but nothing they said could mend a heart shattered so deeply. He sat in the darkness, replaying every moment in his mind. The betrayal, the smirk on Marcus's face, the coldness in Bianca's voice. "I'm not going to let this go," he whispered to himself one night, his jaw tightening. No, not like this. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the quiet. Ethan frowned. Slowly, he stood and walked to the door. When he opened it, his blood boiled. Bianca stood there, her belly now noticeably heavier. Two large, muscular bodyguards flanked her sides, their stares cold and unblinking. And outside, parked by the curb, Marcus lounged in the driver's seat of a black luxury car, sunglasses on even though the sun was hidden behind clouds. Ethan's chest heaved. "What do you want here?" His voice was low but filled with rage. Bianca didn't waste words. She held out a white envelope. "Sign it," she said flatly. Ethan took it, ripped it open, and pulled out the papers. His eyes narrowed. A divorce letter. From their court marriage, barely weeks old. His hands tightened around the papers. "And what about our unborn baby, Bianca? What about my child?" Bianca's lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile. "You wouldn't want to know," she murmured. Ethan's jaw locked. Slowly, very slowly, a dangerous smile crept onto his face. "I'll sign these papers," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "But only on one condition." Bianca tilted her head. "And what's that?" "You give me back my kidney." For the first time, her confident mask cracked. Her eyes widened. "You must be joking." Ethan took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm dead serious." Her tone turned sharp. "I never forced you to donate it to me." With that, she threw the papers at his chest, turned, and walked away. The bodyguards followed. Marcus revved the car engine, smirking through the tinted window as Bianca slid in. The car pulled away slowly, almost mockingly. Ethan stood there, watching them vanish down the street, until his legs gave out. He dropped to his knees on the cold ground, his hands gripping the dirt, tears spilling onto the pavement. His voice broke into a raw cry. "No, I will never allow this," he growled through clenched teeth. "She will give me back my kidney, and she will never, ever, take my baby away from me." The anger in his voice carried into the empty street, a promise etched deep into his soul. Days later, Ethan walked into the courthouse with a storm burning in his chest. He had filed a lawsuit against Bianca. Two demands were written in black and white. The return of his kidney. Full custody of his unborn child. The courtroom was crowded. Reporters sat in the back rows, pens ready. Curious faces filled the benches, whispering about the strange case. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes, took his seat and struck the gavel. Court is now in session. Ethan's lawyer stood, laying out the case. Then the judge looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Ethan Cole, you may speak." Ethan rose slowly, his palms sweating. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor of pain beneath every word. "Your Honor, my first demand is simple. I want her to give me back my kidney." The words hung in the air for only a second before the room erupted. Some gasped. Others burst into laughter. A man in the back leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "How is that even possible?" The judge banged the gavel sharply. "Order in the court. Quiet." Ethan's eyes were glassy, but he didn't back down. "That kidney was mine. I gave it to her when she was dying. Now she's walking away, throwing it in my face as if it meant nothing. I want it back." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, you are aware that such a request is medically impossible?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then at least let the world hear what she did. Let them know who she truly is." He took a deep breath, his voice growing harder. "My second demand is full custody of my unborn child. She will not run away with my baby." The room stirred again. All eyes shifted to Bianca, who sat at the opposite table with Marcus at her side. She was dressed in a designer gown, her belly prominent, her expression cool. Marcus sat back in his chair, an arrogant smirk on his face. Bianca stood slowly, every movement calculated. "I never forced him to donate that kidney," she said coldly. "He did it on his own." Her lips curved into a mocking smile. "And as for the baby, that baby is not his." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Ethan froze. For a second, he thought he hadn't heard her correctly. But the gasps, the murmurs, the shifting bodies around him told him everyone else had. Bianca continued without hesitation. "The baby belongs to Marcus, not Ethan." Ethan's chest tightened so hard, he could barely breathe. His vision swam. He could hear people whispering. Did she just say the baby isn't his? That's cold. She's with the billionaire now. The judge struck the gavel again. "Order. Order in this courtroom." Then he turned to the lawyers. "A DNA test will be ordered immediately. We will reconvene once the results are ready. This court is adjourned until the next hearing date." The gavel came down one last time. Ethan didn't move right away. His legs felt heavy. He gathered his papers, avoiding everyone's eyes, and walked toward the door. He was almost outside when a voice stopped him. Marcus, standing just beyond the courthouse steps, sunglasses in one hand, arrogance in every inch of his posture. "Hey, broke man," he called out, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Why are you wasting your time fighting over something you already know you'll lose?" Ethan said nothing. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice but keeping that cruel smile. "You think you can win a case against a billionaire like me? You should be grateful she even kept your poverty-infected kidney." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides, but his face stayed still. He looked Marcus in the eye for a brief moment, then turned and walked away without a word. Marcus chuckled behind him, the sound echoing in the air like a taunt. The final hearing day arrived. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, people even standing in the aisles. Reporters held cameras ready. The air was tense, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Ethan sat at his table, staring at the polished wood in front of him. His heart pounded in his ears. Across the room, Bianca sat in a fitted designer dress, her belly round, her hand resting lightly in Marcus's. Marcus looked relaxed, almost bored, as if he already knew the outcome. The judge entered. The bailiff called the court to order. After careful review of the case, the judge began, his voice firm. "This court has reached a decision." Every breath in the room seemed to pause. "On the first matter," the judge said, looking directly at Ethan, "the request for the return of a donated kidney is denied. Such a procedure is not medically or legally possible." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he stayed still, his eyes wet. The judge continued. "On the second matter, custody of the unborn child. After a court-ordered DNA test, it has been determined that the child is not the biological offspring of Mr. Ethan Cole." The words were like a hammer to Ethan's chest. "The father," the judge finished, "is Mr. Marcus Kane." Gasps filled the air. Some people covered their mouths, others whispered in shock. Cameras clicked rapidly. Ethan's vision blurred. His breath caught. He swayed where he sat, then his body gave way. He collapsed to the courtroom floor. The bailiff rushed toward him, but Ethan was already on his knees, his head hanging low. Tears streamed down his face. He had spent months caring for a pregnancy, dreaming of holding a baby that wasn't even his. Across the room, Marcus pulled Bianca close, wrapping his arm around her waist. She leaned into him, smiling faintly, as if the whole thing was a performance and she had just won. The judge's voice faded into the background. All Ethan could hear was the sound of muffled laughter, the clicking of cameras, and the memory of Bianca's cold words replaying in his head. By the time the hearing ended, the news was already everywhere. Man loses court battle over kidney and baby that isn't his. Billionaire wins against heartbroken groom. On social media, the world had split in two. Some mocked Ethan, calling him foolish for giving so much to a woman who betrayed him. Others defended him, saying he had a heart too good for the cruelty he faced. Ethan sat on the courthouse steps long after the crowd had left. His face was buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably. The cold wind brushed past, but he barely felt it. His eyes were swollen, his heart heavy, every breath a reminder of the humiliation he had just endured. Most people walked past him, some staring, some pretending not to notice. But one woman stopped. Her name was Lena, a tall, dark-haired woman in her early 30s, wearing a long beige coat, and carrying a press badge around her neck. She had been covering the trial for her news outlet, but when she saw Ethan's broken figure sitting alone, something in her chest tightened. She approached slowly, her heels clicking softly against the stone steps. "Mr. Cole," her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. Ethan lifted his head slightly. His eyes were red, his face pale. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened in there," Lena continued. "That was cruel. No one deserves that." Ethan tried to speak, but his voice cracked, and all that came out was a shaky breath. Without pushing him, she sat down beside him. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. She pulled a small bottle of water from her bag and handed it to him. "Here, take a sip. You look like you haven't eaten or drank all day." He took it with trembling hands, mumbled a "thank you," and stared at the bottle for a moment before drinking. After a long pause, Lena spoke again. "I'm an investigative journalist. I came here today to report the case, but now I think there's a bigger story." "Your story?" Ethan frowned slightly. "What story?" "That I'm the fool who gave up a kidney for a woman who betrayed me." Lena shook her head. "No, that you're the man who gave everything, and was destroyed by people who think they're untouchable." Ethan's eyes searched hers. "And what difference would it make? They're rich. They'll bury the truth." Her lips curled into a determined smile. "Not if we work together. I've brought down people far more powerful than Marcus. But I can't do it without you. You know her. You have history. I have resources. If you help me, I'll dig until I find the truth, and I promise you, they won't see it coming." Ethan hesitated. His mind was still clouded by pain, but somewhere deep inside, her words lit a small spark. "What would you need from me?" he asked quietly. "Everything you can remember," she said. "Photos, old messages, receipts, any evidence of what she's done, not just to you, but to others. And in return, I'll use my contacts, my network, and I'll make sure the whole world knows who they really are." The weight of her offer hung in the air. Ethan thought of Bianca's smirk in the courtroom, Marcus's cruel words, the way the world had laughed at him. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, I'll help you." Lena's eyes softened. "Good. Then we start tonight." She stood, offering him her hand. Ethan took it, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the faintest flicker of something other than grief. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of a fight. For the first time in weeks, Ethan woke up with a reason to get out of bed. The pain was still there. It would always be there, but now it had a target. And a plan. He and Lena worked late into the nights, their table covered in papers, photos, and open laptops. The walls of Lena's apartment began to look like something out of a crime thriller, strings connecting names, faces, and places. Back at Marcus's mansion, when Bianca first moved into Marcus's sprawling glass mansion, she thought she had finally stepped into the life of her dreams. The marble floors shone like mirrors, the air smelled of fresh roses brought in daily by the house staff, and the luxury cars lined up in the driveway sparkled under the sun. But soon, the glow began to fade. The sweet promises Marcus whispered to her in the early days, the late-night talks, the gentle touches, the "I'll take care of you forever," were nowhere to be found. His smiles grew rare. His voice turned flat. He barely looked at her anymore. Instead, Marcus moved through the house like a shadow, always in a rush, always on his phone with people she didn't know. He would hand her envelopes of cash without a word, as if money could replace affection. Then he'd vanish for days, sometimes weeks. No explanations. No goodbyes. At first, Bianca tried to ignore it. She told herself he was busy with work, that he was making money for their future. But as the days dragged on, the silence in the house grew heavier. She started calling him every night, sometimes 10, 15 times in a row. Each time, the phone rang and rang before going dead. She sent messages, long ones, short ones, angry ones, pleading ones, but they all sat there, marked as seen, unanswered. Her frustration soon turned to worry. Where was he going? Who was he with? One rainy afternoon, as she sat by the window scrolling through her unanswered texts, a sudden, sharp pain shot through her stomach. She froze, her breath catching. The pain came again, harder this time, making her double over. Her heart raced. She knew this pain. "Not now, please, not now," she whispered, clutching her belly. But it was too late. Her body had made the decision for her. It was labor. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone. She dialed Marcus first. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. A cold wave of fear swept over her. With trembling fingers, she called for an ambulance. Within minutes, flashing red lights lit up the driveway. Paramedics rushed in, lifting her gently onto the stretcher. The siren wailed as the vehicle sped toward the hospital, the pain in her stomach growing sharper with every bump in the road. The labor was fast, almost a blur. Between gasps of pain and the blinding hospital lights, she heard the cry of a newborn, strong and loud. Tears filled her eyes as they placed a tiny, warm bundle in her arms. A girl. Her daughter. Small, perfect, and beautiful. But as she stared at her baby's face, joy wrestled with an ache in her chest. Marcus should have been here. He should have been the first to hold their child. She tried calling him again from the hospital bed. No answer. She sent messages with shaky hands. Still nothing. 2 days passed. She waited, the baby sleeping in a cot beside her, the room quiet except for the soft beeping of hospital machines. On the 3rd day, her phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. She answered instantly. Marcus, I had the baby, a beautiful girl. You need to come. On the other end, his voice was calm. Too calm. I'll be back soon. Then the line went dead. But soon stretched into 2 long weeks before Marcus finally walked into the hospital room. He stood by the doorway, wearing dark sunglasses even indoors, looking more like a guest than a father meeting his newborn for the first time. Bianca's eyes filled with tears, not from joy this time, but from something heavier. Something she couldn't yet name. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lena continued their investigation. Ethan pored over old files on his phone, scrolling through years of memories. Photos he once thought were sweet little moments now felt like sharp blades. There was Bianca, smiling at a gala she claimed was for charity. In the corner of one shot, almost hidden, Marcus stood watching her with a glass of champagne in hand. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. Lena leaned over his shoulder one night. These pictures, they tell a story, Ethan. And it's not the one she told you. As the days went by, Lena's contacts began feeding her information, quiet whispers from people who feared Marcus's power. A dock worker who had seen strange shipments arrive under false labels. A bank clerk who noticed unusual transfers from Bianca's charity into private offshore accounts. But the turning point came from Lena's surveillance contact, a man who owed her a favor. He slid a flash drive across the table and said only one thing. Play it. They opened the files. Grainy footage filled the screen. Marcus at a warehouse late at night, supervising crates being unloaded. One of them split open, revealing tightly packed bricks wrapped in plastic. Ethan's stomach turned. That's drugs. More than that, Lena said, her voice low. This is international smuggling. It got worse. Financial records Lena had obtained through a whistleblower showed large deposits into Bianca's charity account, followed by immediate transfers to shell companies overseas. She wasn't just aware of Marcus's business. She was helping him hide the profits. When they had it all, wiretaps of Marcus's men discussing shipments, photos of Bianca and Marcus at secret meetings, documents tying her charity to money laundering. Lena sat back in her chair and let out a slow breath. This, she said, holding up the folder thick with evidence, is going to end them. They didn't go to the police first. No, Lena knew the story had to break in the court of public opinion. She crafted it carefully, every fact bulletproof, every photo undeniable. The article dropped online at midnight. The documentary followed at sunrise. By noon, it had gone viral. Billionaire Marcus Kane exposed in drug smuggling ring. Charity used as laundering front. Courtroom drama Groom reveals ex-wife's criminal empire. Social media exploded. People who had mocked Ethan before now flooded his pages with apologies and praise. Others called for Marcus and Bianca's arrest. News outlets replayed clips from the documentary over and over. Marcus's face in that warehouse, Bianca signing fake donation papers, the money trail traced step by step. Ethan watched it all from Lena's apartment, his hands shaking, not from fear, but from the rush of knowing they had finally struck back. But Lena's eyes were serious as she turned to him. This is just the beginning, she said. Marcus won't go down without a fight. And Ethan knew she was right. Because men like Marcus didn't just lose, they retaliated. The storm that Ethan and Lena had unleashed hit fast, and it hit hard. It was close to midnight when the sound of tires screeched in the driveway. Moments later, the front door swung open with a loud clack. Marcus stepped in, breathing hard, his shirt clinging slightly to his chest, as if he'd been running or had just come from somewhere he shouldn't have been. Bianca was curled up on the velvet sofa in the sitting room, one leg crossed over the other, her face unreadable. Marcus didn't even take off his coat. Have you seen the news?" he demanded, his voice sharp and rushed. "It's everywhere. The whole country's talking." Bianca didn't answer. She simply stared at him, her silence heavy enough to make him fidget. "I'm asking you a question," Marcus snapped, stepping closer. His breathing was still uneven, his eyes darting as if he expected someone to burst in at any moment. "Have you seen it or not?" Finally, Bianca turned her head toward him, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Where are you coming from, Marcus?" He frowned. "What? I'm talking about something important and you're asking me. Where are you coming from?" she repeated, her tone firmer now. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Don't start with me, Bianca. This is serious." "This is serious too," she cut him off. From beside her, she picked up his phone and tapped the screen. A video began to play, grainy but clear enough to show Marcus in a dimly lit club, surrounded by a crowd of young women. The music thumped through the speakers, neon lights flashing over his grinning face as he poured champagne into waiting glasses, his arms draped casually around two women's shoulders. Bianca held the phone up to him. "Someone sent me this. That's you, isn't it?" Marcus's eyes flickered, but he didn't deny it. "Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" Bianca's voice trembled, with anger or hurt, he couldn't tell. "Cheating on your wife? The woman who loves you?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. His lips curled in a defiant smirk. "Yes, and so?" Bianca's eyes widened, the shock momentarily stealing her voice. "And so?" she echoed. "That's right." Marcus shot back, stepping closer until he towered over her. "I haven't done worse than you." Her brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus's voice was cold, every word like a dagger. "You were cheating on your husband, the man who gave you a piece of his own body to save your life. You watched him suffer through surgery. You let him believe the baby was his. You let him plan a wedding you knew you'd never walk into. Tell me, Bianca, what's more evil than that?" Bianca's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I was doing it for you, Marcus. Because I love you. And this is how you talk to me." Marcus scoffed. "Love?" He shook his head slowly. "You wouldn't even know what that means." Before Bianca could respond, the sharp, splintering bang of wood breaking echoed through the mansion. Both of them froze. The front door burst open with a deafening crash, the hinges groaning under the force. Armed officers poured into the house, their voices booming. "Police. Hands where we can see them." Red and blue lights flashed against the walls, sirens wailing outside. The sound of heavy boots thundered across the marble floor as the officers stormed in. Bianca's breath caught in her throat. Marcus's face drained of color. The storm Ethan and Lena had unleashed had just arrived at their doorstep. Sirens wailed, flashing lights lit up the night sky, and helicopters circled above. The news cameras caught every second. Marcus in a silk robe, wrists cuffed behind his back, shouting at the officers. Bianca was dragged out minutes later, her hair a tangled mess, her makeup streaked from tears. Gone was the elegant woman in designer gowns. In her place was someone cornered and powerless. The charges were damning: drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy. Their sprawling mansions, sports cars, and millions in bank accounts were frozen, pending trial. Ethan watched the scene unfold from his living room TV. He didn't smile, but deep inside, there was a quiet satisfaction. The woman who had once stood above him, looking down with contempt, was now facing the world in handcuffs. Weeks later, Bianca walked out of jail on bail. But she wasn't the same. Her reputation was in ruins. Friends avoided her. Doors that once opened without question now slammed shut. She tried to act as if she still had control, posting filtered selfies, making small public appearances, but it was a hollow performance. The real breaking point came during Marcus's sentencing. The courtroom was tense, packed with reporters and spectators. Marcus sat in his suit, his smirk gone, his eyes darting around as if searching for a way out. Bianca was in the gallery, clutching her handbag like it was the last valuable thing she owned. The judge's voice was clear and final. "Marcus Kane, this court finds you guilty on all charges. You are hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. All seized assets are permanently forfeited to the government." The gavel struck. For a second, there was silence. Then Bianca let out a raw, guttural scream. It wasn't anger, it was despair. The sound echoed off the walls, cutting through the murmurs of the room. She slumped forward, shaking uncontrollably, before collapsing onto the floor. Chaos erupted. Officers rushed toward her. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Cameras clicked wildly. Hours later, Bianca woke up in a hospital bed, her wrists hooked to 4 lines. The white walls felt cold and empty. A doctor stood at her side, his face serious. "Ms. Bianca, I'm afraid the stress, combined with years of poor self-care, has severely damaged your transplanted kidney. It's failing. You'll need another transplant immediately, or you'll have to start dialysis. Without treatment, your time will be limited." Her breath caught. Another transplant? How much? The doctor hesitated. "A lot. And given your current legal situation, well, the hospital will need proof of funds before we can proceed." Bianca's chest tightened. All her accounts were frozen. Every asset seized. She had nothing. No money. No allies. No Marcus. Tears streamed down her face, and she covered her mouth to muffle the sob that tore from her chest. The cruel irony was unbearable. The kidney Ethan had given her out of love was now failing, just as her life had collapsed around her. Somewhere across town, Ethan sat in a meeting room with his lawyer. Public sympathy from the expose had worked in his favor. Despite the DNA results, the judge granted him custody of Emma, the little girl he still loved as his own. He signed the papers with steady hands. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed, but this time, the flashes didn't feel like weapons. They felt like light breaking through after a long storm. Beside him, Lena smiled. "You did it, Ethan. You turned all that pain into something that matters." And she was right. Within months, Ethan launched a foundation for victims of betrayal and organ donation disputes. He spoke at events, met with donors, and told his story, not to dwell on the hurt, but to show others that survival was possible. Meanwhile, Bianca lay in a dim hospital room, alone, her phone silent. No friends, no family, no one willing to help. The same woman who once thought she could never be touched now faced the slow, cruel weight of karma, helpless, broke, and with her life ticking away. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories like this.